This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, the fellow of infinite jest, excellent in fancy. He hath... No! It's wrong! It's all wrong!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler.
One of the very best episodes of Tales from the Crypt was
Top Billing,
which Todd Holland directed first season that Gil and I were on the show. It just was a great combination of all the great EC comics elements and horror and comedy, and Todd was the perfect person to have directed that episode.
And that episode won an Ace Award.
It did. And Todd, of course, went on to do things like The Larry Sanders Show and Malcolm in the Middle. And of course, he directed a great cult classic, The Wizard.
Alan, we should let Todd speak for himself about those things and let our listeners hear it from the horse's mouth.
Joel Silver had us reshoot the very last shot of my episode. And I found the director's cut. I'm trying to load it and find it because he didn't think it was gory enough. And I think his version wasn't much gorier.
That's the shot where is that Jon Lovitz's face on the trash
and the dog comes in. So I found the director's cut of it. I was just trying to find it so I could show it to you, but I having trouble loading my whole thing here. I'm not sure.
You know what? We will come to Tales from the Crypt. We have a whole voyage we're going to take you on.
Okay.
You hail from Kittanning, Pennsylvania.
Kittanning, yes.
Kittanning. Okay, so I knew I would mispronounce it. So Kittanning. Okay, is that local Indian word?
I was 5 when we left, so I don't even know. I was actually 3 when we left. So I don't even know. My father had his medical practice there, and I'm the third kid. So I had 2 kids in a medical practice, and then he was a GP. And then he went back to medical school to become an ophthalmologist. And we moved to Cleveland because we lived outside of Cleveland because he worked at the Cleveland Clinic. He did his residency at the Cleveland Clinic. And then from there, I moved to where I spent my whole life, which is at 6, I moved to Meadville, Pennsylvania. And that's where I spent my life. Interestingly, when I first left for film school, and the papers called me former accountant Todd Holland. And when Steven Spielberg hired me, they called me Meadville native Todd Holland. A little Hollywood, and everybody wants to claim you.
Do you feel any connection to that part of the world? I grew up in Baltimore, and I was a doctor's kid too. My dad was a surgeon.
Oh yeah, my dad was an eye surgeon, so it was even worse. It was grosser. Yeah, I love that part of the country. In fact, we still own a summer cottage in Chautauqua Institution, which is an hour and 15 minutes north of Meadville. It's very close. And so we go back to Chautauqua and sometimes go to Meadville. I still have high school friends there. So it's a great little town. I could never live there, but I love the weather. It rained. It was overcast 300 days a year. It rained a lot. There were great thunderstorms. Autumn was super spooky and moody. I loved all the atmosphere. I think clinically one of the upside down seasonal affective disorder people. There's like 10% of us that have the opposite. Like blue skies bum me out. So I'm that guy. So I belonged in northwestern PA. I don't belong in California weather-wise.
That's why you spend so much time in Vancouver.
That's why I love Vancouver. Anything with weather, mist. Whenever I was telling somebody, I said, whenever I'm in snow or rain, I kind of feel like I'm in a movie because the whole world has a specific tonal, blanket, but when it's beautiful out and the sun is shining, it just feels so generic. Like you don't know what movie you're in. As weird as that sounds, I love the all-encompassing atmosphere of weather, of interesting weather.
A doctor's kid, feel like that impacted you in any way? I know our dinner table conversations when, well, most of my friends were doctors' kids, so they had the same kind of conversations. When non-medical people would come to dinner table conversation would sometimes discuss them, because my father had no qualms whatsoever about talking about the burst appendix that he had to kind of dig out with his fingertips that day. We were quite used to it, but
well, we didn't really do that at dinner, and I don't remember. We didn't have friends we didn't have kids our age. We lived in a very tight neighborhood of kids, so the kids we were all different. One was a lawyer, one was the director of the YMCA.
It was like an R gang. So it was like an R gang comedy.
Our backyard before we moved in had been like the ball field for all these backyards because it was bigger. Cool. And then we moved in, and so then we sort of inherited all that. It was great. But what my dad did do, and I someday want to put this in something, but he would use the same camera to shoot his obsessed what do you call them? His abscessed eye infections and his industrial accidents and that he used for family vacations. And so there'd be a slide of us at the beach, a slide of us in the surf, then this separating eye with this whole thing. We would go, "Oh, Dad, no!" And it would just show up in the queue of slides.
When I was 16, I would do photo work for my dad, and I would scrub in with him, and I would take pictures of what he was doing, so that when he did rounds, I would make those slides for him.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. No,
I didn't know that about you, Alan. That explains a lot to me.
My father's father also was a physician, so it was expected that I would follow
Alan, we're twins. My grandfather, my father, my older brother, all doctors.
There you go. And then suddenly it got to us, and it hit a wall. I can't do math. You?
I'm not good with math. No.
There you go. There you go. We sucked the math.
No one ever had any illusion I was going to be a doctor. Although we could have said that about my older brother too, who goes very queasy around blood, but he became an ER doctor. So there you go.
I guess you got over it. Now, looking at your IMDb Pro page, the bio section, did you have a hand in writing that?
I actually wrote it.
Okay, there you go.
I have one full hand in writing it.
In that case, then we will be speaking from the horse's mouth, as it were, and none of this should come as a surprise to you, I hope.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, it says Todd Holland's life was changed forever when, at the age of 5, he saw an episode of Johnny Quest that scared the bejesus out of him. And from that moment, he wanted life to always be that exciting. Johnny Quest.
Oh my God, I love Johnny Quest.
What episode?
I don't know the number, but it's the invisible electric blob. They go to this doctor's on this island. He does this thing and creates this energy monster.
Yeah.
So it's totally Forbidden Planet. It scared the shit out of me at 5. And like this adrenaline pedal hit the floor, and I wanted life to always be that exciting. Like I wanted to always be that enervated by my world. That's when I got hooked on stories at 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so Chicken Thing is my student film that launched my career, is the metaphorical story of that journey of that 5-year-old boy.
We will talk about Chicken Thing. I watched it.
Oh, okay. Good.
I watched it. It's quite good. I think you have a future in this business. All right.
Hopeful.
So it seems like you did okay by that dream you suddenly had, that life should always be that exciting.
Yeah, I was a handful as a kid. I always tell my mother, I said she transformed the existence of a super weird kid with 77 simple words. Just clean it up when you're done. Because I would make movies and I would destroy the living room and upturn the furniture, and she'd come in the door with this weary look and just go, just clean it up when you're done. And I honestly got good at that. I got good at cleaning up behind myself. And so basically I had freedom to do all this stuff, because I also learned to be responsible enough to to put it all back, I was telling my kids are 13 now. I said, my mother loved when I cooked because I left the kitchen cleaner than she had it. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah,
so you were making movies. You were seeing the world through a lens.
At 5, I want to tell stories as much as a 5-year-old can. By 9, I'm in a little town of 18,000, mind you. And this is before Premiere Magazine, before there's any access to any kind of entertainment news of any kind. And I heard there was someone called a director and that they were in charge of telling stories. And I said, I'm going to be a director. At 9, I decided I was going to be a director. Because I'm going to be the storyteller. And so they basically I always likened myself to a young Olympic athlete, although I'm completely unathletic, but I would say, I just knew this is on my path. This is not. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I'm going this way. You know what I mean? From 9, I was like that. Like, I'm going to make movies. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to build things. I'm going to make things. I'm going to, and so I would make my own ray guns and get balsa wood and make props. And I was always doing that.
What chicken thing is really terrific. You have, well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You've got an amazingly good eye.
Thank you. I started as a camera guy. My thing was always shots, not technical camera, but my thing was like the image. I was always an image. So, I was not an actor's director at all. And people always ask me, you've done theater, right? I go, no, but thank you. I'm flattered.
No, just setting, as you set the whole thing up, it's beautifully done. Like I said, the camera work is really terrific. And when we finally get to the chicken thing, it's terrific. It's so much fun.
There's a great making of, and I'll try to link you to it. It was on the DVD, and it was a layered thing, and so I tried to get the guy who made it to send me that layer, you know what I mean, so I could have it as a digital file.
What the hell's going on in here?
Are you all right, honey?
Yeah. But he made was a young, brilliant filmmaker. He was young at the time, but he did this like making of that's remarkably entertaining considering there was no footage of the making of. Yeah. He kind of reconstructed the whole process and interviewed me and used imagery and stuff. It's like 4 minutes longer than the actual movie, but it's great. I was at UCLA in 1981. Optical effects were shit at the student level. And anybody who tried them, they looked silly and they were bad in the early 80s. But a few students tried to do the spaceship or the thing. And I just said, that's not going to work. I don't have time for that. I don't have the money for that. I need to do it like they did in the 50s, and it's going to fit because it's the period. I'm going to set the thing in like the ambiguous non-present. Like, this is where we set Malcolm in the middle, the ambiguous non-present, and I'm going to just base it on my childhood, basically, my memory of my childhood. But the book I got was all about, shooting miniatures at the frame rate to represent the scale of the movement and all those 1950s special practical effects books, and I ended up doing everything. My DP and my model builder both failed me on the first year of the movie. And so I just realized then nobody cares as much as I do. So we shot the first chunk of the movie, and then part of the film was damaged because the camera was dirty and it all got scratched. I spent 7 months straight, seven days a week, building miniatures and planning the whole second year of this movie. And the little boy got a year older, lost his front tooth, and I just had him keep his mouth shut, and then we shot all the miniatures and everything like a full year later, and just put up corners of the sets and did like a second unit shoot, sort of, except it had significant photography. And I built everything. And that's because I knew I could do it because I built stuff my whole life. If a relative would come, they would always say, Todd, what project are you working on now? Because I always had a card table that was covered with balsa wood and glue and something. I was always making something, so, but that's why Chicken Thing was like the perfect project for me, because I could almost, I mean, I had a lot of help, but the big categories, I could parse it out. So on the second year of shooting, I was the DP too, and I learned all. I'd taken cinematography, but I hadn't had to understand it completely. But I learned it. I forgot it when I didn't need it, And then, I got the manual and I learned it again. And but I just figured nobody cares more than you, so I just do it.
Sometimes you have to be a one-man band. It's just the only way to do it. But Chicken Thing got you amazing stories.
Yeah, I always tell people it's the best advice I never got, which I stumbled into, which is go to film school in California because your friends will get jobs. But I was so unhappy as a Pennsylvania boy in Los Angeles, and I have my seasonal affective disorder thing where I hate blue skies. I was miserable in California. I hated UCLA, I hated Los Angeles. It was super smoggy back then. It was gross. It was alienating. My hometown was half the size of UCLA in a city of 5 million. I mean, it was gross. So, but I stuck it out. I went back and looked at Northwestern, looked at Columbia. They didn't have a production thing at that time. I didn't know that. But I looked at NYU and I just stuck it out at UCLA. And it's the best thing I ever did because, one, it was a great film school for me. Because unlike USC, you own your film at UCLA, and it's really laissez-faire. It's like, you want to make a film? Sure, go make a film. Bye. They don't give you much of anything. They give you a tiny bit of equipment. Most of it's pretty beat up. They don't give you any film stock. They don't give you any money. They don't give you. They don't assign a crew to you, and so you had to learn to be charismatic and really learn to negotiate with people to help you. And you had to learn to empower people with your passion, and you had to learn to help them on their films. So I was a dolly grip, and I ran catering, and I was a AD, and I did everything for everybody else. So it was that barter system, barter economy. And so that was good. And then at the end, I owned the film. So when it got distribution, I made all my money back on it. It was sold to public libraries around the country in 16 millimeter prints, mind you. And then eventually in VHS tapes when that kind of took off. So Danelle Black worked on the film. She was a friend, and she left film school. And I was still slogging away in post for a year while I was a waiter. I would cut the movie from midnight to 5 a.m.
Where were you a waiter? Where?
The Century Plaza Hotel.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Wow. That's gone.
Yeah. I was in the coffee shop level place of the Century Plaza Hotel. Huh. And I'd work till 11 and go to UCLA at midnight and cut the film until 5 in the morning because that's when the flatbeds were easy to get. And so, but I was doing that for like a year. And Danelle just came to me and said, get your film, and we're picking second season directors for Amazing Stories. And I was like, it's not done. I mean, there's one print. It's at the color timer. We're trying to finish it. And so I basically went to Photocam and took the only print that existed that only the color timer and I had ever seen. I took it to Amblin and I left it there. And the legend is, I actually know Steven now, but the legend is he walked in the door and on his first day off in a million years. He'd been shooting The Color Purple and hadn't had a day off in forever. And he walked in, he was bored. He says, "Where's Deborah, his director of development?" And he was told she's in the screening room watching student shorts. And he walked in, he saw Chicken Thing unsolicited and said, "I want to meet this guy."
It's great visual storytelling, which that takes a lot of confidence for a young filmmaker to do.
That's what I understood, that more than I understood dialogue. I understood visual storytelling because, the movie that the Johnny Quest started me, but the movie the lens through which I became focused was Jaws. Back in the day, they would release Jaws like every summer. It would come back to theaters and back to theaters and back to theaters. And I would go every night. I must have seen that in theaters 250 times. I would just go every night and I would get bored and I'd keep going. I was obsessed with that movie. And I would just, when I got bored, I would just tap my finger on every edit. And I would go, "There's a cut. There's a cut." I would just start to find different ways to absorb the movie, different sort of filters, because I was obsessed with it. The framing, the cinematography, the comedy, the drama, the suspense. So I used Jaws as like my early, high school, grad school experience in film. And then when people at UCLA was very social oriented, social mission oriented. It was very political. It was very much, if you're not trying to make important films, you're a loser. And my best friend committed suicide in film school, and I shut down Chicken Thing, and I felt I had to write something about what I'd gone through. And I wrote this movie. Believe it or not, Bryan Cranston starred in it, and a couple other people. I wrote this thing, and I was like, on the last night of shooting at Griffith Observatory, I convinced someone to shoot there, and I realized I wasn't ready. I was in so much pain still. I wrote this Hitchcock kind of thing about not knowing somebody, and it was all this stuff. And I wasn't ready. And I basically said, this is not what I intended to be judged on as a director. And I went home that summer, and I said, what am I going to do? I don't want to finish this movie. And I just spent all this money, and my reputation is now staked on people know I shot this movie. And I mulled it over, and I said, I have to fail on my own terms, and I'm going to go back. And I put that whole thing in a box, and I don't have the footage. The footage was in Seattle at some lab up there, never reclaimed the negative. I said, I'm going to forgive myself because I didn't have control over any of this. And I'm going to go back, and I'm going to do the thing that I meant to do from the beginning. And I started Chicken Thing again. And because I said, I told everybody for 3 years, 4 years, I told everybody, I need 10 minutes of film I can put on anybody's desk. And I can say, take it or leave it. This is the best I can do. And if that's not good enough, I need to move to plan B, which I didn't have. So that's what I knew Chicken Thing had to be. And so it took so long to make. I grew up so the movie had to grow up with me. The first year there was no wraparound. The whole sort of lightning storm, and then the whole Twilight Zone didn't happen. That was new. I wrote that during the 7 months of building the other thing, and then I realized it needed to be about more than just the action, And so I wrote the wraparound and then shot that, and that's really I was growing up too as a writer and a filmmaker, and so really it was my story of like watching Johnny Quest and really not knowing when the pedal goes to the metal, like, are you in control or is the media in control? Like, how am I in control of my choices about entertainment, or is it controlling me? Because I don't know the answer to that still.
It says Todd has directed more than 200 episodes of television and 3 feature films, including the gamer cult classic, The Wizard. The graphics then versus the graphics that you would have at your disposal now are night and day. It's fascinating to watch, and you create a tremendous visual energy, despite the fact that the computer graphics they're really quite lame. They were how to wring energy and emotion and drive out of computer graphics that gave you nothing. Nothing is quite a feat.
And Casey Silver tried to convince me not to direct that movie. I had several features fall apart at Universal in a row. And then I sort of read that on a Wednesday. I interviewed on a Thursday. I got hired on Friday, and I started on Monday. We're shooting 35 days later. So it was like a shot out of a rocket. It was all road movie, all location. But I always said that I'm not a gamer. So if I can't make this interesting to me, if I can make it interesting, if I can make it interesting to me, I can make it interesting to anybody. Right. So I knew I had to solve that problem. And that part of that became the information storytelling of any kind of, gamer situation. We realized we had to go back and create that scoreboard, which a UCLA animation friend of mine built that for me, and we hired her to do that. And then we had to go back and shoot, the interstitial dialogue that was never scripted that helped the viewer understand the progress of the game, who's ahead, who's behind, what's good, what's bad. Because, kids always make fun of me today because not my kids, but 35-year-old kids who say, well, how did she know about the flute and the thing? And I go, guys, it's like we knew how the game worked. We needed to get we didn't move on. So we told her what to say. So, but it's the Super Mario, the energy of that game to kids who were 6 to 10 at that moment in time was off the charts.
Yep.
Off the charts. Those kids are still there. I'm doing podcasts all the time about the Wizard because it meant the world to them. And I gotta say, honestly, I fought very hard for that movie. And your whole podcast made me think about, because I was told for 20 years that movie was a total flop, that it made no money and nobody saw it. And when it came out on DVD, I learned there was social media, and then I found Twitter. And I've heard the Twitter fans, and there were so many people that said, if I had 10 DVDs on a desert island, 9 of them would be The Wizard, And so it was weird to me to realize, oh my God, I actually connected with the kids I so wanted to connect with. But nobody told me that for 20 years. Yeah.
The delivery systems used to be that the delivery systems kind of stood between us, the creators, and the audience.
Yeah.
And now the delivery system, at the end of the day, Napster came for all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
And really, right, anyone can do what we do, really, in truth. Hopefully we do it better so that we earn the higher paycheck.
Yeah.
Some of us get occasionally. That said, your work has earned you 3 Emmy Awards, 8 Emmy nominations, 5 Cable Ace Awards, a DGA Award, 6 DGA nominations, and a WGA nomination.
Correct.
That's probably why we hired you to do Tales from the Crypt.
No, I begged for that job for years, and you guys, everybody wanted to direct Tales from the Crypt. Everybody. And I just wasn't fancy enough yet. I wasn't fancy enough. What's really shocking, though, Tales from the Crypt is my first ever nomination for anything. I was nominated for a Cable Ace Award. And I was like, as we all know, when you get on a hot show that's in the award stream, it's so much easier to be seen. If you're not on one of those shows, nobody cares. And I guess Tales was one of those shows. I don't know, but I wasn't anticipating. On Larry Sanders, you get nominated, then you think you're going to get nominated. You're expecting to get nominated the next time, But Tales, I had no expectation. It was the most thrilling thing of my life, and I had such a good time with that episode and that cast, and John Astin and
an amazing cast, just a great cast,
amazing cast.
And because of what the story was about, they were really all allowed to have as much fun as they wanted to. And gosh, it seemed like John Astin was having the time of his life.
Yeah, but he had the chops to really keep it grounded. And he was lovely. I worked with his son since then. I just tell him, like, God, I love your dad so much. And his dad is still, to my knowledge, teaching theater, is still passionate. It's my big thing from all my educational work at the Directors Guild is like, protect your joy. Just protect your joy in this life, because in this career, and directors don't talk about it enough, but our industry doesn't talk about it. But, when you get bitter or resentful, or ain't nobody want that, and nobody wants to hire that. So protect your joy. My byline is protect your joy, hone your craft, expand your network, repeat. Joy is the biggest one.
That's such good advice. So many times we come upon young filmmakers who are really sort of groping and trying to figure out how do I get to the next base.
Yeah.
And then when they get to the next base, it all falls apart, or they don't know where to go from there. And sometimes they get lost from the joy and go in a different direction.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you my other advice I always give. It's like if this year I have no agent problems. I coach directors all the time. I have no agent problems. And next year you have, my agent sucks problems. So congratulations, you have a shitty agent. It's like, what you don't want to do is a year later be saying, I have no agent still. You want to have new problems. May your problems ever be evolving, because that means you're on the move. Things are happening. When your problems never change, then you're stuck.
Then you have a real problem.
Then you have a real problem. Yeah.
There were so many great comedic choices in the episode. When Louise Flesher flossing her teeth while she cuts Jon Lovitz's character loose is so funny.
And shove him down your fucking throat!
Do you remember whose choice that was?
That was mine. I asked her to do it.
Fantastic choice.
She was delightful.
It is.
And I'll tell one Louise Fletcher story, because I wasn't working a lot then, and I had a habit of writing handwritten thank you notes to the cast after I finished something, So I wrote one to all the players, and Louise writes back, and I don't know where this letter is. I wish I could find it. She says, "Oh, Todd, your note reminds me of the days when actresses wore white gloves to work and directors wore ties." It was the most elegant, classy. Wow. She was just lovely. And then I got to hire her again on my series Wonderfalls, like, I don't know, 15 years later, 10 years later, something. Yeah.
That has been one of the great pleasures of doing Tales from the Crypt, is we got to work with.
Yeah.
And growing up a film loving kid, like you, to suddenly be meeting them, okay, but working with them, working with them, that was unlike anything. I mean, the greatest rush you could imagine. You're suddenly collaborating with these people. Like an amazing cast. Sandra Bernhard is great. Kimmy Robertson is very, very funny.
It's over, Barry. I'm moving in with Bruno.
Bruno?
We met in class. Barry, Bruno, Barry. I left some chicken in the fridge for you.
Chicken?
I brought her from the Twin Peaks.
We could still be friends.
I called her and said, "Kimmy, it's not much, but would you do this for me?" And she was, "Yeah, sure."
And it's funny because I knew Kimmy because I had done a Groundlings class with her.
Okay, that's funny.
And so it was great. It was great.
And Greg Cook, who played the guy who's playing Hamlet, he and I had just done the Vietnam War story for HBO. So I said, "Greg, you got to do this. You got to do this part." And then wait, I didn't know what's his name. Oh, I want to say John, the stage manager. What's his name? You know what I mean?
Paul Benedict.
Paul Benedict. I loved him so much.
Actors.
I loved him. They're all so great.
Oh, and everyone just seems to be spot on.
Ouch.
I watched it again and go, it's funny. It's of the Twin Peaks era. It's cinematic, but it's small. You know what I mean? It's close-ups. I mean, Twin Peaks was, if you watch it again, it's from a pre MTV kind of energy. Those shows had not yet absorbed the MTV like frenetic drive, and Tales is my Tales, at least, reminds me of that, where it's elegant close-ups and some medium shots and occasional wide, but it's really about faces. It was fun.
What Top Billing also does is it navigates that fine line between comedy and horror.
Yeah. And
really, the two have so much in common. The thing that you reacted to, Johnny Quest, it was kind of a moment of horror.
Yeah.
And so right off the bat, horror seems to have grabbed you. And there's always been, hey, Chicken Thing is horrifying.
Chicken Thing's a horror comedy. Nice. I got sent my first scripts from CAA was like Big Top Pee-wee, the sequel to Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I got sent some slasher movie because nobody who watched Chicken Thing could quite understand who I was. They kind of figured I could do both, and I could. I just ended up, and I didn't really. I was honestly, I was in a rare crew of like Michael Lehman, me, Ken Kwapis. There was a handful of people back in that day who understood dramedy, who could do comedy that was rooted in because it was either big, sticky comedy or it was drama, and so that's sort of where I lived, and I got all those. it was canceled before I did it, but I was booked for a Bakersfield PD, you know, these quirky shows that are on the edge. And that's really where that's where my spirit inhabits, the quirk on the edges. But I also can't tolerate when everything just goes full quirk and there's no emotional substance. Like I need to have emotional stakes. I need to root for characters. And you get a Monster High, the thing behind me, the poster behind me, that is the Nickelodeon movies I'm making now. And I just love big stakes. And I finally get to do these Marvel level life and death stakes. And, after a life in comedy, it's so satisfying because comedy just doesn't give you stakes.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't. We can't really blow up the world and no one would take us seriously.
I'm in love with worlds of dread. Like I don't like slasher movies. I don't like crazy people with knives because I think that shit's real. But you give me a shark or an alien creature, anything that I don't have to worry is outside my garage, I'm gonna dive into it, because I believe people are crazy. So I don't want to see the psychopath who kidnaps the person and holds them prisoner in their basement. I don't want to see that, So Alien is, and if you study, it's actually the finale of The Wizard is a direct ripoff from, it's designed around the mothership in Aliens, it's designed around all these space hatches and the caution tape edges and we put in the voice. We had, warning, video Armageddon will start in T-minus 20 seconds, 19. I just did all of that. I pulled all of Aliens into The Wizard because again, I'm always trying to raise the stakes. When those kids are running behind the mechanisms of King Kong, that's all my like a little 12-year-old fantasy stuff. I love The Exorcist because it's for its emotional grounding,
Yeah, real people.
Like the horror part of it, I saw it so late that I couldn't relate to the heart attacks and all the stuff. I saw it a decade late, so I really wasn't sure what it was or whether I was interested because of my thing. But when I saw it, it was like, when there's this one moment and never leaves me because he just makes my heart start pounding. It was in that Ellen Burstyn's in that room. Ellen Burstyn? Yeah, that's her. No, it's not. Yeah, she's in that room and the furniture is sliding around. Her daughter is like, I don't know if she's masturbating or she's flying up and down and she starts screaming and then they just cut to that track in the mist and her scream rings out over that foggy track where the priest is jogging and you think, holy shit, what is going on in this house? You know what I mean? And they did such the brilliance of that movie is also that sequence, which everyone tried to copy, where they put her through all those medical tests. And then those doctors, those smug fuck doctors, sit at the end and they said, have you considered a priest? And you go, oh my, he just freaking just started stripping away it's a little like Nightmare on Elm Street, honestly, in a different way. But I went to a drive-in where Nightmare on Elm Street was the second feature in film school. And my buddy I was with, we had chairs out and we were watching the drive-in. And when they wake up, but Freddy continues. The genius of that was it was breaking all film language about how dreams work. That was the genius of it. And my friend got physically angry. They can't do that. They can't do that, and I was like, I think they are, but he was like, you're breaking the rules. There are rules. We all agree on the rules. You can't do that. And that's what made it so scary,
Yeah, he was trying to hold back a tide. Forget about it.
The effectiveness of it was knowing that people held these rules. It's the same thing in Alien when you're hanging on to Tom Skerritt as your hero. And then he gets toasted and you're going, holy shit, I have to hang on to this woman if I'm going to get out of this movie alive. And that was the anarchist kind of like revolutionary genius masterstroke of Alien. That if you wanted to get out of that movie alive, you had to believe a woman could get you out, and that was the first time we'd ever had a female action hero like that. So outside of horror, traditional horror.
And Ripley stands as a great female character.
Yeah.
Huge. Wow. In other interviews, you have said that you rarely laugh out loud at anything.
It's true. It's very true. You have to say something unexpected to me. I work with stand-ups through all the Larry Sanders years, and Gary would always try his stand-up on me, and I would say, please don't, because you're not going to get what you want. I'm a contrarian. My son is too. He's genetic, apparently. Whereas I know you want me to laugh, and you're building a structure to this joke that I can see coming, and I can't give it to you because I feel the structure of the joke building, and I don't mean to be that way. I just am that way.
What is worse than fake laughter?
I asked them that at Friends when I directed my one and only episode, and the director ahead of me was just guffawing at every rehearsal. I shadowed for a week, and then I went to them and said, "I'm sorry if I have to laugh like that. I'm the wrong person. I can't do that." And every show I've ever been on, like Malcolm, all the writers. I mean, it's very kind, honestly. But all the showrunner would mandate that all the writers laugh at the auditions when people read, except Todd. He doesn't have to because he knew I couldn't do it. I was terrible at it. I'm like, I can't. But writers love to laugh at their own jokes. It's what they do. And so I was the only one who had to waver to not pretend laugh.
Not an easy personality to work with, Gary Shandling.
What have you heard?
I mean, or was he?
No, I went to his memorial. He was not. I went to his memorial, and Judd got up, and then Gavin DeBecker got up. It was like Gary was a brother. Gary was a saint. I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. And then Kevin Nealon got up, and God bless him. He said, Gary was a complicated man. I was, oh, thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Somebody's going to tell some balance here, because Gary was a complicated man. He had a self-loathing thing, an avoidance thing of his own craft. And he was a genius. Like, I knew I was working for a genius, because when he would figure things out, I would go, oh, that was really good. That was really, like, I got it. I got that it was good. And he could identify talent, and of course burned a billion writers, and was ungrateful. And his Buddhism was stealth Buddhism, I always said, because you couldn't really perceive it in the waking world. He got more so later in life. We didn't end well on the show. Sort of a lack of gratitude. And then, to my delight, Twitter again kind of connected us, because I didn't really, there was no email then. Then back at Larry Sanders, there was no email. And so I didn't have all the deets kind of stuff for him and so Twitter put us back in touch, and he changed. He was so grateful for what I contributed to the show. And he, I was one of the few people that lasted the whole run of the show. I mean, almost nobody lasted the whole time. I didn't stay for the last year. I left and came back, but he fired everybody eventually, except Peter Smokler, the DP, me, and the crew. But writers, like almost nobody. Judd Apatow never did a whole season, to my knowledge. Peter Toland never did a whole season. So that was their genius. They would get out of things and leave. So Gary would always want them. But anybody that wanted to be there, it was always, it was tough. So many friends got burned by him, which is sad to say.
It is one of the tricks of this business, is to navigate those personalities. You mentioned you had to deal with something that Joel wanted to reshoot on on the last shot of your episode, the shot of the dog grabbing Jon Lovitz's face. Gil, over the course of this podcast, has told many extraordinarily good Joel Silver stories. You can't take that away from Joel. He does something that no one else has done. But working with him is a fucking bitch.
I couldn't do it. I realized that was sort of I heard your podcast. I go, oh, that's why I never made it big in movies, because I'm not crazy like that. I just can't do it, and I can't bear it. My father was a very difficult man, and it trained me. He was a drinker, and he was difficult. He had a huge ego, and and so I learned to navigate those people. I learned skills which served me on several shows with very strongly charismatic, shall we say, writer creators and difficult people. But it's like, No, I don't need. I can't do that now. I can't spend my day doing that. I realize, and I fear my children don't have an alcoholic to deal with, and so how are they going to learn these things? They're defenseless. I should drink more. I don't know. It's like so it's like.
Well, I think the drinking more is a good advice. I think that's always good advice. But just mentioning about Joel, I mean, he and I lasted about 15 years together, working together. And I often thought along the way and since, how did that happen? And the one thing about Joel was that there was always this passion. It sometimes was misdirected and it sometimes didn't work. But I always felt like he was passionate about trying to get whatever it is that he wanted to get done. And I think that's sort of what I admired, if I can call it admiration for him, while we were working together, even though it was insane and it was crazy.
Yeah, well, I listened to your podcast and I was marveling at your stories about that. I forget the whole. Oh, it's making Bordello blood, or wait, that's one you made, or is it that's one you made, right? Because there was the whole thing about not making the one you wanted to make and making the other one. I listened to it a year ago, but your whole idea of Stallone's girlfriend Angie and Stallone and down in Seattle and the whole thing, and I was like, you navigating that. I mean, and you would just go up against him, and when you felt you could, and I remember on The Wizard. I was contractually obligated to deliver a 90-minute movie. And I said, a 35-day prep, and I'm shooting. And as I got closer and closer, I kept saying, this script is too long. This script is going to be 2.5 hours long. It's too long. And so nobody would listen to me. The writer wouldn't listen. The producer wouldn't listen. So I decided in my 29-year-old wisdom to throw a tantrum.
If all else fails.
I don't know how to throw a tantrum. I don't know how to be a Joel Silver. So I threw a tantrum and I said, I'm not shooting it. I'm not shooting all this. This is crazy. It's never going to be in the movie and I'm not going to do it. And of course, Universal eventually turned against me. My agent had to fly to Nevada, and it was a whole stinging thing. And so I turned the whole production, I heard on Universal, the studio and my partners against me. And we came in, the movie was the editor's cut was 2.5 hours long. I had to take an hour out of the movie, and nobody would listen to me. I was the villain, and I go, this whole business makes no sense. And then, the last day of shooting, they're planning a 21-hour day because they don't want to shoot the ending of the movie. If you've seen The Wizard, it's crazy making. If you've seen The Wizard, I got the script, and the kid is wandering with his lunchbox, but he had no purpose. And I pitched, what if he's saying something? What if he's saying something like California, and nobody knows what that means? And at the end of the movie, what if they're driving back because the movie ended very Karate Kid ended at the competition, kind of almost. It was very abrupt, the ending. And I said, well, what if it goes on a beat longer and they're driving home and you see maybe those dinosaurs from Pee-wee's Big Adventure and the kid jumps out and it turns out he's been trying to get here the whole time. He had a reason. He wanted something that nobody understood. And what he wanted was to put his sister to rest at the last place. The whole family was happy. That was all my idea. And so they wrote it in. And then we are halfway through we shot in Nevada and Northern California, and we're on our way back. We came back to LA. We're at Universal Studios shooting a chase scene with kids on a tram, which is stunts with kids is so slow and dangerous. And, and then the producer and the writer pull me aside and say, Universal doesn't want to shoot the ending. I'm like, wait, what? I said, what? And I was so stressed out that day. I was like, that's crazy talk. We've already baked in all the California, the whole setup shot already. So if you shoot the ending, you can not use it and take it out. But if you don't shoot it, you have to take it out. So either way, you're butchering something, before you even seen if it worked. And so I just said, I'm shooting it. I just refused not to shoot it. And it was the last day of shooting. We'd drive out to those dinosaurs and it needed to be rewritten and the writer wouldn't talk to me anymore. And so I just rewrote the fucking thing myself and I put it on a sheet of paper. I walked in that day, I had the only copy and I said, Bo, you're saying this. Fred, you're saying this. Jenny, you say this. And that's what we shot. And that's the ending of the movie because they wouldn't talk to me about it because nobody wanted to do it. And that is honestly the thing besides Super Mario 3, that culmination of that story is what people remember about that movie.
Yeah.
And I fought like crazy. I was 29 years old and I fought like crazy for that little movie. And I realized I was mulling on it recently. Oh, I really did fight for that movie. And that's what directors do. You got to fight against all this stupidity and all this short-sightedness. And that's what your podcast is like, alarming. Never make how not to make a movie, because it's like,
and also you're the villain. You just said a moment ago, you were the villain, you were the bad guy.
I was the bad guy.
You were the bad guy. Of course you were the bad guy.
I'll tell you
probably the bad guy, even though the writers wrote a 2.5-hour movie. You were the bad guy, because how could you shoot a movie that was 2.5 hours? We gave you the material. You told them it was 2.5 hours, but in their minds, it wasn't 2.5 hours. So you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed much.
I know. And that's what's so crazy. And then I'll tell you, the last day was going to be a 21-hour day. It was the day they didn't want to shoot. And I said, why don't we shoot 2 10-hour days instead of 1 21 in the movie? It was like the last day before we moved south or something. I don't know. But and nobody would listen to me. I went to the head of production at Universal at 29 and I told her the whole story. And she said, that's a good idea. Why don't you go fight for that? She didn't help at all.
Right.
She didn't do anything.
They don't want to get involved. They don't want to take on anything that might not be,
So I listen to your podcast and I hear you fighting the fight. And I go, oh, that's who I needed to be, but I didn't know how to be you. I didn't have that upbringing. I had sort of a jujitsu upbringing where I just worked around the violent obstacle. You know what I mean? I didn't have a boxing. Oh,
I didn't have a boxing one either. My philosophy was run. And then bully running after me.
You seem very direct to me, in more of a way than I
there was no alternative, because Joel, if you didn't do that with Joel, he would kill you. He would just throw you aside.
I'll tell you, I did a second feature, which we don't need to talk about, but at one point I felt like the producer, old timer, something was wrong. And I went to him and I sat down and I said, I just want to make sure we're okay, because I feel there's some tension, and he starts blathering because he's uncomfortable because I'm confronting him. And in his blathering, he says things he doesn't realize he's verbalizing. And he basically says to me that he's backstabbing me to the studio. And I hear the words like they're filtering through and I'm getting the meaning. He doesn't even know he's saying it out loud. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dolly zoom in on Todd in shock and horror. And I was like, holy shit, he's working against me. He's telling them I don't know what I'm doing and I'm incompetent. And then I realized that I had just wanted to direct, but now I thought he could handle the studio and all that stuff I hate. But now I realize part of my survival plan is I need to work them too. So I called them every day and I report. I said, oh yeah, Larry's upset. He's like a little girl, he gets so uptight and and I just spun shit back at him because I that's the only game there was to play. But it was like, I go, this is no way to create anything. This is no way to create anything.
Yeah.
Among the projects that you created that also seemed to have didn't get the love it deserved was Wonderfalls.
Wonderfalls, yes. Wonderfalls is one of the great creative joys of my career, and
it's such a lovely series. I mean, it's lovely. What you shot was lovely. It's great.
Thank you. And honestly, did you see the reviews? Every major paper, it was like people were like reviewers are prostrate at our feet with these reviews. Didn't matter, didn't make any difference. And I keep trying to get my ex-business partner is now the president of 20th, and I keep telling her, look, you got it, because when Wonderfalls was brutally canceled after 4 episodes, we had 13. They went back and they changed the music licenses from television to home video. And that is what keeps it siloed in DVD and it can't stream, because they wanted to save 20 cents on the music licenses. And they remixed the first 4 and they remixed everything else. And so, but I keep saying you have to find out how much it would cost to to rebuy the music licenses, because it's like, I think people love to see it streaming, but so far no. So, and now with content being pulled down, it seems even less likely. But Wonderfalls was Oh my God, it was so joyful. Brian and I created that together.
That's Brian Fuller.
And then he was shooting, when we did the pilot, he was shooting the TV movie Carrie in Vancouver while I was producing and directing Wonderfalls pilot in Toronto. And so he basically, I got to do it all by myself, which was fantastic. And so this incredibly joyful crew who I took my next movie back to. I took Firehouse Dog back to them. But we had such a joyful time, and the cast was amazing. But Brian's a complicated creative genius, and he had this very ambitious, challenging idea for episode 2. We bullied Tim Minear to come in and partner with us, a very prolific, showrunner. And Tim was going to give order to all the writing, and Brian was bringing the genius, and I was directing, producing, but I was going to come back to LA and write one, and Tim Minear wanted to come to Canada and direct one. And so I'm literally at IKEA in Toronto buying shit from my apartment when they call and they say they're throwing out episode 2. And because Brian would never listen to anybody's advice about the script. And I said to myself at the checkout at IKEA, I said, oh my God, I'm never going home, and they're never coming here. And that's what happened. I never got to leave Canada, and I never wrote a script, and Tim never directed one. And because it was like we were in chaos from episode 2 on, just always trying to catch up. But it was very joyful chaos. It was very joyful chaos.
Todd, you might want to try one more time, because with the strike going on, which I suspect is going to last for a while, those licensing rights for the music might be a very interesting way for them to get new product and have it available to them that they're not going to have for a while.
Honestly, what's weird about Wonderfalls is that every 6 months a journalist writes about it.
Yeah.
Although Paste magazine just did a whole thing ranking Wonderfalls episodes from 13 best to, in numerical order, ranking them. And I sent it to my friend and I said, look, they're still writing about Wonderfalls. It's been off the air for 10 years, I don't know, 10 years, 2003. Oh, no, 18 years, 18 years, whatever. 2003, not 2013. Yeah, 2003. So 20 years. Anyways, I will try again. It has a loyal cult following. It was fun too. It was just fun. It was exactly my kind of thing.
It would be great as a streaming. If one could resurrect it, it would be a great streaming series. It's got all the dynamics to be that kind of story.
And back in the day, I was at 20th for 11 years, and in my early days there doing pilots, and I said 20th is the HBO of free TV. They really took stylistic, creative swings. They were brave. And I think by the end of my tenure there, everything got more cautious, and I'm sure there's a million business reasons why that happens, but I really thought they were doing such. Wonderfalls is like the weirdest thing on the planet, and they bit into it, and they did it, and they were so supportive of it until it didn't.
Well, they got much less creative and more economically, perhaps I'll say responsible, but maybe that's not the right term. And one doesn't have to be totally opposed to the other, which they always thought they would be. I think with this, you can also talk about, this is a cheap way of getting a new product out there that no one's seen, but it could very well, with success, wind up being a series that's picked up and more shows ordered.
Yeah, we've always wanted
to. They would have a win-win, because they would take something that's a total that I'm sure they wrote off,
an asset,
not that much money, have resurrected, sold, and if it works, someone's going to say, we want more of these.
I mean, how much could 20-year-old music licenses cost?
Right.
Right. But somebody has to do the work to figure it out. And that's all I'm begging them to do. You don't have to agree to pay for it. Just agree to pay somebody to figure it out. How much is that going to cost?
Yeah.
So I've been pushing for a while now.
Cool.
But so joyful. I'm still friends with that cast. I adore them. Brian and I are still friends, and just super special. So, and then when it got brutally canceled, I was already planning a trip to Europe, and I was like, fuck America, I'm leaving. So.
Is Wonderfalls where you met Scotch?
No. Wonderfalls is 2003. I met Scotch in 98. So
Oh, God. So long before.
5 years prior. Yeah, we were married by the time we did Wonderfalls.
Oh, okay.
Well, we had a commitment that in 2000 you couldn't get married. We had a commitment ceremony. And we've done it all. We got the legal marriage before Prop 8, and then we were, whatever, got married again afterwards.
You've been together forever. How long has it been?
23 years. Well, 25 years. We got married. We've been married 23 years.
Cool. And you have triplets. How old are your triplets now?
They're 13 years old.
Wow.
2 girls and a boy. They're all 13. It's a good days, bad days times,
Yeah, I've got a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I had mine late in life, and as you have, and it's it's certainly it does keep you it keeps you from aging. You have no choice. You have no choice.
It's true. And you're around people who are 10 years younger than you because everybody's at that certain age, especially in LA. I mean, when the kids were born in Fontana, which is inland, and it was like the kid and the father next to me was like 19, and he assumed I was the grandfather. But once you come to the coast, people are dads are older, Yeah.
Speaking as an older dad, life has done what it's done to us already. We've absorbed all the bumps and bruises, and I think we do make for better, hopefully more patient parents.
I think you have less to prove because you've already had time to prove some stuff. And like I said, it was a great time. If I'd have done this in my 30s or when it was all popping, I think it would have been very hard to focus or be present, and you figure why a lot of marriages fall apart. And I think we did it at the right time. And I was thinking about it. I had the 3 of them on vacation, and it was sometimes I was lonely because they were always like separate from themselves and doing their thing and brooding, And but we were in lockdown with them when they were still 8. We started lockdown at 8. And I was like, they were the most fun. We had the best time in COVID lockdown. We were a great cohort. It took them a year and a half to even think to Zoom with their friends, they hadn't thought about it, And so it was like the best time, but I have the great empathy for any parent that went through lockdown with a surly teenager. I was like, oh my God, that would have been awful for the teenager and the parent.
Todd, I cannot thank you enough for spending your Sunday afternoon with us today.
Oh, absolutely. Tales is very important to me. So I'm thrilled to talk to you guys, and I enjoy your podcast and how it just goes right at the crazy factor of Hollywood. It's like I still don't know how to navigate it. That's why these movies, Nickelodeon is like the first place where they're so grateful for everything I brought to it, and they're so appreciative of what I give. At every other place I've ever done long form, I'm always fighting. And Firehouse Dog, the only difference, I got stabbed in the back by my producers on my first and second movies. And then the Firehouse Dog, my producer was my best friend. And the difference was we both got stabbed in the back by the studio.
It's good to have company.
At least I wasn't alone. I wasn't
Exactly.
alone in it. Half of my agenda, full half, is not just to make an exceptional product, because I want that desperately. I want to make this company into a family. Like, I am determined that they feel respected, they feel they're treated right, they're paid right. You know what I mean? I'm determined, and I do that on an episodic gig. I can't control any of their pay, nothing like that. But I certainly can control how I behave and interact with them and the respect I give them. And at every turn, I feel when it's happened. I was doing just an episode of Grace and Frankie, and like day 4, some grip walked past and just put his hand on my back as he passed by, and I went, "Oh, he didn't have to do that. That was I'm winning them. I won them. They know I respect them. They know I'm not an asshole. They know, what I mean? And you feel the crew when they do that, and that's important because it means you're communicating to them that you value them. And I learned from Gary Shandling, one of the great things I learned: a good idea can come from anywhere, and you be happy to steal it. So be open to anything. So he wasn't the most generous man, but he was good at that. He listened to anybody. So I'm always
So good ideas can come from anywhere, and protect your joy.
Protect your joy, hone your craft, expand your network, repeat.
And with that, everybody, we thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Todd.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Al.
The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.